Before we get started, if you're looking for one of those, here's the one trick to help you learn lines in 5 seconds flat. This is not one of those videos, so you might as well click off now. But if you want actual advice that will actually work, then keep on watching. Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to learn lines thoroughly and quickly. Am I using this to procrastinate from my own line learning? Don't judge me. He who is without sin cast the first stone. So yes, before we get started, show of the week is Follies because it's about show business. So I'll put a link to the cast recording below in the description so you can check it out. Love it or hate it, learning is part of being a performer, whether it's lines, songs, music, choreography. You need to learn stuff and then perform it in front of people. But obviously, unless you've got a photographic memory, that's easier for some people than others and it takes a bit of work. So hopefully these tips that I'm going to share you today will help you if you are someone who struggles learning lines in general or struggles learning lines in a particular scenario. For example, you need to learn lines before you've rehearsed them and blocked them. I know for a lot of people, myself included, learning lines when you haven't worked on the scene that you're learning the lines for can be really difficult. So hopefully these tips will help you if you're in that situation. And if you would like a follow-up on how to learn songs and music thoroughly and quickly, then let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, give me a cheeky like and subscribe if you want to. This is not like a dictatorship. Maybe it could be, I don't know. Let me know if you want a dictatorship. No, we don't do dictatorships. We are a democracy on this channel. Not like a democracy in the UK where politicians can just lie about shit, like an actual democracy where we listen to the people. But then we don't, because it takes me ages to do any of the suggestions that you guys give me. So we'll be a friendly dictatorship. We'll be a dictatorship made up of kittens and sunshines and rainbows. How's that? Not one of those evil military ones where people get shot in the head. This has gone on a really long tangent and I really need to stop.
I was gonna say, it's not, I don't remember styles of government being a particularly big influence in the learning of the lines.
I am so tired. So here's some tips on how to learn lines if you struggle with that. Let's go. Also, yes, I look shiny. No, I'm not going to apologize. So you're in a play. Congrats. You need to learn some lines. Number one, which should go without saying, read the play. There is no getting round reading the play. You need to read the play so that you know what the heck is going on and how you fit into it. Even if you have one line in one scene, I know it's annoying if you're like in Hamlet and you're guard number 3. I know it's long, but you need to read the play. You need to know what's going on. Also, if you don't read the play, it'll be really, really obvious to the director and then they'll never hire you again. So it's in your best interest to read the play, guys. Number 2, once you've read the play and you know all of the bits that you need to learn, be honest with yourself. Know thyself, young actor, young Padawan, because some people are really, really good at learning lines. I'm one of those people. I've always had quite a good memory for lines in shows. When I was in school, I would know everyone else's line. I wouldn't be that annoying person who would like deliberately correct people when they got it wrong or anything like that, but I remember stuff really well. So learning lines isn't that difficult for me. It's getting harder. But oh God, it's getting harder. But it's still relatively easy. Some people, learning lines just doesn't come easily to you, and that's okay. But be honest with yourself. If you know you can learn lines quickly and you're like, I don't have to stress, I can, you know, wait until I've gone through all of my scenes in rehearsal before I start learning them, then that's great. Do that. If you know that it takes you a long time to learn lines and you know you have too short of a rehearsal period to be like, you know, I can wait till we've worked the scene to start learning it, be honest with yourself and start learning it sooner. I know it's annoying, but it's going to be way less stressful for you. And you don't want to get into the situation where it's opening night and you still don't really know the lines. That's not okay. That's not good. You don't want to be that person for yourself or for everyone else. So be honest with yourself about how easily you learn lines. Number 3, once you've read the play and you've introspected about your abilities as a line learner, the best way I found, and many people find, to learn lines is to learn the lines with the emotion and the intention with which you're going to perform the lines. Usually this is the thing that makes learning lines easier once you've worked the scene in rehearsal with the director, is because you've made those emotional and intention connections by acting it out on its feet or talking it through or whatever. You don't need a rehearsal or a director to do that. It's easier to have the experience facilitated by a director, but you don't need it. If you need to learn your lines before rehearsal for whatever reason, because you prefer it or you know you won't have time, just make sure when you're reading your lines or going through sections and learning them, when you're saying your lines, repeating your lines to yourself, you're doing it with the intention of that character, and you're doing it with the emotional intention of the scene. It doesn't have to be like all out, like you don't have to be weeping on the floor every time you go over a line, but just doing it monotone with no intention, no emotion or whatever, it's going to be way harder for you to remember the lines. It's easier to remember things when there's an emotional memory or an intention memory connected with it, rather than just a string of words with no kind of other meaning. Well, with no meaning, essentially. Connected with this is number 4, which is try and link the train of thought. And this is between lines or between sentences, but also within a sentence for specific words. This is to help you to get the right order of things, especially when it's from line to line or paragraph to paragraph. And it can be tricky if the train of thought doesn't match your natural train of thought. When that happens, consciously thinking about, okay, I've said this, but then I say that. What is the connecting link to those two things? They will help you link those trains of thoughts so that you can remember the sequence of events, especially with things like monologues or doing a one-person play like I did a couple of years ago. That was really important because you have nothing to prompt you. You don't have another person to prompt you, so you need to be really clear about those trains of thoughts. Similarly, for specific words within a sentence or within a line, if there's a word that you always paraphrase or that you always miss out, having a conscious thought of why my character has specifically chosen to say that particular word rather than not saying that word or saying a slightly different word, again, will help you to remember the sentence order, sentence structure, the words that are in the sentence. Speaking of paraphrasing can be useful, especially in the early stages when you're just trying to get a kind of macro scale sequence of events and thought trains throughout the play. If, for example, you have a big role and you need to get an idea of the overview of your whole arc through that, but try not to paraphrase for too long, because as I'm sure some of you may have had experience of or witnessed people doing this, if you paraphrase too long, you can get the paraphrased version stuck in your memory and therefore find it even harder to learn the actual lines. And even with something like new writing, it is best practice to say what is written. The playwright has chosen those words for a reason, and yes, if it's a workshop or whatever, you can have a discussion about that doesn't feel natural to say, can I say this instead? Those are discussions that can be had, but it's always best practice to at least attempt to learn what's written because there's probably a good reason why the playwright has chosen to write your lines in the way that they're written. If they're a good playwright, at least. Sometimes playwrights might not be good and then you can fight your corner, but for the most part, learn what's on the page. Try not to paraphrase too much. Number 6, and there's no way around this one, repetition, repetition, repetition. You need to repeat the lines so they go into your long-term memory. It's long, it's laborious, it's tedious, but you have to do it. Ideally, if you can, try and read with someone, whether it's a fellow cast member or if you've got someone at home, if you're learning beforehand, who can read with you. Or you can record yourself saying the other person's lines and then leave gaps for your lines, so when you play it back you can put in your lines. That's what I always do when I have an audition, for example. There are ways you can make it more interesting for yourself. For example, once you know the emotional through line or the intention through line of your character and you've gone over the lines a few times with those intentions, you can play around with completely wacky things. For example, I do this with songs sometimes, like singing them in funny accents, doing funny voices, completely flipping the way the scene's meant to go, doing it in a comedic way if it's tragic, doing it in a tragic way if it's comedic, just to vary it enough so that you don't get so bored out of your mind that you just can't face going back and drilling your lines until you've got them right. That being said, you do need to repeat them. And this is also true in the learning process as well, especially if you've got something that is more like a monologue. For example, the show I'm doing now is a two-hander, but a lot of my stuff is direct addressed to the audience, so it's very much like a soliloquy or a monologue. Once you've learned a little bit, go down a few lines and then go back to the top and repeat what you've done, and then learn a bit more, then go back and repeat it. Repeating it as you're learning it, as you go with fresh stuff, so that you're not repeating too long after you first learnt it. Just continue going over and refreshing stuff that you've already learned will also help with that. Now you might be thinking, that's great, Michaela, that's all cool, but I've got 2 scenes to learn in less than 24 hours for an audition tomorrow. What do I do then? In that situation, when you know you don't have a lot of time, firstly, don't stress yourself out by being like, I have to learn this by heart. No, you don't. It's not a memory test, and you're not going to show the panel anything of what you can do if you're just focusing on, I need to learn it by heart, and then you go into the audition and all you're doing is looking blankly into space as you try and remember the lines. In my experience, the best thing to do in that situation is to focus on the intention and the emotion of the scene. Intention most importantly, because the intention is the thing that gives you your acting choices. What does your character want? What does your character want to achieve? Why is your character saying what they're saying? And then the emotion will come from, if you have time, reading the play. If you don't have time, at the very least, try and Google a synopsis of the play. At the very, very least, read the scene, obviously. Again, still repeat the scene, still go over the lines, still try and learn it as best you can, depending on the amount of time you've got. But just focus on, I need to learn it and be as familiar as I can. Go in with the sides, and you may surprise yourself about how much of it you can actually learn by heart, especially without the pressure of, I need to learn this. Because what happens is, I've been in this situation multiple times. I'm sure if you're an actor, you have as well. You put pressure on yourself of, I need to learn this by tomorrow. You're going over the lines, trying to say them without looking, and you mess up, and then you get yourself wound up and stressed out because this simple line isn't going into my head. That's not going to help you. And it's going to actually stop you retaining the information. Whereas if you're like, I'm not going to be able to learn this by heart. I'm going to learn it as best I can. I'm going to prepare it as much as I can. I'm going to let myself go into the room with the sides. And then if I need to look at them, they're there. It's fine. It takes such a weight off your shoulder that it kind of gives your brain the freedom to recall the lines. Whereas if you don't have the size, or you don't let yourself have the size, you can kind of tense and freeze up being like, oh, what is it? When you know it, but it's too short a time for you to be really secure. It's not in your muscle memory. If you're on stage and you're like months into a run and you forget a line, the muscle memory takes over and it just comes out of your mouth and you're like, okay, great. Like, has anyone else had this when it's the beginning of a show and you have the first line or it's the first lyric of a song and literally just before your mind goes completely blank and you're like, what are the words? I do not know what the words are. And then they just come out of your mouth and you're like, thank God. Oh my goodness. And you just like, everything slows down, like your heart skips a beat and just the words emerge from your lips and you're like, oh, thank goodness. When you've had to learn something in 24 hours, that's not going to happen. So don't give yourself that extra stress. And any casting director or director worth their salt is gonna be like, well, you had 24 hours, it's fine. You've clearly prepared, you've thought about the character. That's what they want to see. They don't want to see you remember some lines. in a short space of time. They want to see you performing the part and what you bring and what choices you make and whether you're right for it. One of the things I haven't mentioned are line learning apps, and that's because, to be honest, I personally don't use them. And in my opinion, in most cases, I don't think they're really necessary. Now, it might be that you have certain access needs and using an app makes it easier, or you might just like using a certain app for learning lines because it makes it easier for you. And that's absolutely fine. Whatever works for you works. Whatever gets the lines into your head, do it. However, if you're fairly new to acting and you're still trying to figure out what works for you and what doesn't, I would recommend not jumping straight to, oh, use this app. All line learning consists of, in its most basic component, is knowing what you're saying in terms of your intention and emotion, like why you're saying what you're saying, and then just repeating that until it's in your muscle memory. Boiled down to its bare bones, that's all it is. And you can do that just with the script. And if you have no one to read with you and you have lots of cue lines for your part, recording yourself on a voice recorder app that is on any smartphone, it like comes built in. That's all you really need. I haven't used any line learning apps, so I don't know specifically what the functionality of those are, but I can't imagine them adding or innovating very much on those two things. I might be wrong, let me know in the comments if I am. But when you're starting out on anything new, and this is not just, you know, acting, line learning, this is kind of any new venture, it can be really easy to get caught up on what is the tech that I need, what is the system that I need to use, etc, etc. I need this app and this thing and XYZ, when you actually don't. If you've tried all of the tips that I've suggested already without a line learning app and you're like, I still need something else, then maybe give them a try. But if you're new to acting or you've always struggled to learn lines and you haven't tried the approaches that I've mentioned, maybe try those first before resorting to downloading or paying for an app that might not actually help that much more than what you can do just with what you already have, if that makes sense. So those are my top tips for being able to learn lines thoroughly, effectively, quickly if you need to, although be kind to yourself, you can only learn lines so quickly unless you have a photographic memory. And yeah, I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Would love to have you on the channel. Come on down, we have a great time. Buy me a coffee over on Ko-fi if you would like. Stay tuned for more theatre content from a UK perspective, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye friends!